This series of videos introduces the 38 chapters of the Routledge Handbook of Environmental Movements. It's a project of the Social Change Lab, and we gratefully acknowledge the support of the Mary Lee bequest for the work of our team.
Hi, everyone. This is Winifred Lewis, and we're continuing with part 2 of our chapter 4 discussion about the tar wars and climate justice activism. And we're here with Professor Ellen Spears, the author of the chapter, and Yuchi Liu, who's a student who's been working with us to bring some of these ideas to life.
Hi, Professor Spear. Could you mind introduce each different environment activists in different pipeline? Thank you.
Well, one place to start would be right in the Alberta tar sands and the Athabasca region of Alberta, and a leader in the Beaver Lake Cree Nation, and that is Crystal Layman. She was featured in Naomi Klein's video version of her book, This Changes Everything. And she talks about what it means to her that these ancestral lands have been so deeply destroyed and degraded. She says the tar sands extractors' assault, these are my words, on Indigenous land and bodies is, quote, a complete dismissal of legal and ethical duties to protect our waters, our one true mother, Earth, and the ecosystems that life depends on. She talks there about the loss of caribou habitat, the contamination of water supplies, oil spills have killed birds and other wildlife. It's also been very damaging to the human population, not only taking land. One thing that happens around these pipeline centers, and it's not unique to Fort McMurray, which is the main place that people fly in and out of who are working at the tar sands, but there's serious gender violence, sexual violence against women, even some disappearances of women that kind of follows these camps. And so it's a devastating impact on the land and the people.
And that's the closest site to the tar sands in Canada. And as you say, it's really just one of many where people have tried to mobilize. I was shocked when I looked at the maps in the chapter. Canadian, as some of you can hear from my accent, but I've been living in Australia for 20 years, by how long those pipelines are. And they stretch all the way from Canada, perhaps all of you know this, right down to the border of the Gulf, the ocean in the southern US. And so can you tell us some more about some of the other communities along that pipeline that have mobilized against it?
Well, yes, you're right. These are tentacles that reach out to the west coast and the east coast of Canada. They go deep into the Gulf South. One of the main places, and we have that I focused in this chapter, was on Standing Rock. That's one of the pipelines that goes through the ancestral lands of the Standing Rock Sioux and the 7 tribes in that region, the Oshedi-Shakawen. It also goes south through Oklahoma and is a problem for farmers taking their land with eminent domain, to using eminent domain, which is supposed to be used for public purposes, using it for a private company that is taking that pipeline through. And it's built amazing alliances along the way. As a result, goes deep into Texas, and from there, the Bayou Bridge pipeline extends into Louisiana. Louisiana is already damaged deeply by crisscrossing oil pipelines. There's a whole area, chemical plants along the Mississippi River, Cancer Alley from Baton Rouge to New Orleans.
Can I just stop you there? Because I know
yes.
I hadn't heard of that before now, and it's just such a classic example of the indirect violence, the structural violence against communities of color and people living in poverty, that there's a place called Cancer Alley. So can you tell us about that chemical poisoning that these people are experiencing?
Yes, this is a stretch of land along the river The chemical companies primarily, but a lot of oil refineries as well, have moved in the old plantation. Some of them directly into the old plantation houses have become their headquarters. You know, this rich landscape that has been inhabited by African Americans since the slavery period. One of the places where African Americans owned land, and some of those towns have been just completely obliterated. People have had to be relocated because it's so toxic in that stretch between Baton Rouge and New Orleans.
I think that's one of the themes that I picked up in your chapter, as we were just talking about, where in addition to the mobilizing of environmental activists in both countries, you know, coming together to address the injustice of the pipelines and the environmental degradation and damage and the disrespect for the rule of law. In addition to that coalition, there really is another coalition of industry and energy companies that have mobilized as a counter movement. Do you want to talk about some of the themes in the chapter relevant to that as well?
Well, I think one of the industry coalitions that came together in the late 80s and early 90s was called the Global Climate Coalition. So the names are kind of
greenwashing, yeah,
chosen for greenwashing. And that was the big auto companies in the US and major oil companies. ExxonMobil was one of those companies that contributed millions of dollars. And this at a time, the LA Times later revealed that the Exxon executives were making decisions based on their understanding that climate change is real. At the same time, they were funding this coalition that was putting out all kinds of propaganda that it wasn't, and having a huge impact in the US Congress. So that coalition sort of dissolved in the early 2000s when it was really became untenable to say there is no climate change. But that money we've seen, you know, in the US in particular, that kind of money has gone more into the dark money field where it's much harder to trace. You don't really know which candidates are being supported by which people. So those lobbying efforts are even harder to track down. But the industry has been a major roadblock to moving in the direction of protecting the climate and the people in it.
I think as I have been reading these chapters, the theme of evolution has kept coming back to me, that the movements are evolving and their opponents are evolving. You know, you talked about sort of their coalition withered in the face of empirical reality and science, and that's good. But they continue to resist the transition to fossil fuels. And we do see that play out in the activist struggles and in the politics. I don't know if there's something key that you wanted to talk about just in the few minutes remaining.
Well, here's one example of that. There was a major US climate initiative in 2010. It was informally known as the Waxman-Markey bill. It was a climate change initiative in Congress, was moving forward. The American Clean Energy and Security Act had lots of important provisions for carbon capture and storage and smart grid and electrical cars, and was this controversial among environmentalists, but it had a carbon pricing scheme in it as well. And at the last minute, it was defeated in Congress. And so that had a big effect on the movement. And you talk about this in your chapter, the bottom up and top down issue. Yeah. The environmental organizations, the national environmental organizations, have mainly been characterized, not entirely, and they often make a coalition with local groups, but they've mainly been working on a top-down model. And it really woke people up, and people said, we've got to be helping more these local organizations in Oklahoma and North and South Dakota and the Gulf South. if we really expect to win these fights in Congress to change things. And so
it's a
kind of
fascinating tension. I
Yeah.
think so many environmentalists kind of feel connected to and identify with the broader world beyond state borders, and not just nation state, but locality and state. But actually, politics and governance is profoundly local. And so connecting in with local, as I'm reading the book, you know, it's a theme that keeps coming back to me, and your chapter speaks very powerfully of that. Connecting in with local expressions and engagement with environmental issues requires broadening out to understand the full spectrum of concerns that people have, and to some extent, you know, creating an inclusive movement. Not easy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a challenging endeavor. And other scholars have said that local places are the place at which global processes take place. And so these big global issues like climate have a real impact on the ground in particular locales.
I'm old enough to remember in the 80s, we used to say, think globally, act locally. I feel like we're rediscovering the wisdom of the elders. Yuchi, what about you as we close this section? Do you have any final thoughts or questions that you want to chime in with?
Yeah, I just think that it's a really good topic that introduce all the environment issues like between the Canada and American, these two major, of course, there's only two countries in the North America, but also like
there's Mexico too, but yeah.
Oh, right, sorry.
Yeah.
My geography.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like it's really good thoughts that I have two thoughts. Like one is to really admire these protesters. Like even though they've been treated violently, but they were still like to protest like peacefully. Like that. And another thought is that I think the Democrats and the liberals have to like find some way to put their dispute away in environmental issues, and they have to find a way to cooperate. Do
you mean the Republicans? Is that
yeah, sorry, the Republicans
Democrats
and the Democrats. Yeah. They should like, do you have any good suggestions how they can cooperate with each other and to make the environment issue just an environment issue, not become a political games? Yeah.
Well, this is the big issue of our time in this country, not just around environment, but around everything. We have this, several terrible Supreme Court decisions that have come down, but one of them affects the environment. And the Supreme Court has said that the EPA overstepped its authority to regulate greenhouse gases. So people are going to have to figure out other ways, and they have some strategies. Gina McCarthy, who used to be EPA administrator, now she's a national climate advisor in the Biden administration, said, it's disappointing. That's an understatement, but it is. But we have other ways of regulating emissions, and that includes going after all of the other pollutants that industry is emitting. And there's a major ruling just coming out. Very likely Texas is going to be, a major portion of Texas is going to be declared a non-attainment area under the Clean Air Act. And that will give the EPA tools with which to address this problem. But we really need to do exactly what you're saying, which is to find places where people can agree that this is unacceptable in a society that cares about the health of its residents. And so that is the issue before us. You definitely named it.
I feel as though the themes of unity and inclusion and trans-border but place-based activism are going to be important in that community of renewal in the environmental movement. And the leadership of peoples from disadvantaged communities, rather than tolerating as a moral problem and a strategic problem the ongoing overprivileging of some segments of the community in the environmental movement. That's all going to be part of the solution, and I think your chapter speaks to that really powerfully. Well, I might finish there. Go on, Professor Spears.
No, I was just going to say thank you. You've said it like it needs to be said.
And look forward to the responses of viewers, if any, right? I'll screenshot the comments section and send them to you, Professor Spears.
That would be great. I'd
if we
love
get
that.
any viewers, which is an open question. All right, well, I might finish there, and I'll say thank you again to Professor Spears, our chapter author, and to you, Chief, for being here. Thank you. And thank you to our viewers if you're here with us for part 2 of this video. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Great.
For those of you watching, be sure to subscribe and follow us at Social Change UQ, and check out our website for more videos.